Hey everybody, this is Steve Dunlap in Instructional Services, back with another video for 6th grade. We're going to be looking at content for the next week, which would be February 11th. You're going to be starting topic 13, or you should be right around there starting topic 13, maybe finishing up 12, or maybe you're already into 13 just a little bit. Today's video is going to be relatively quick. I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit. You're going to look at that week. You have 4 days. So we're going to look again at what standards you're going to be looking at. We'll take a real quick look at the math background for teachers, and then maybe give you some hints and suggestions about how to work through topic 13. So first things first, let's take a look at your pacing. Again, this week, obviously you're finishing up topic 12, and then next week you'll be starting topic 13. You're going to have 4 days there. Next thing we want to take a look at is our blueprint correlation guide. We introduced this last week. If you're not sure how to use this or how to read this, you can go ahead and look at last week's video to kind of give you some hints about how to navigate this document. Okay, so you'll notice looking at this document again, we're going to go back and try to find out where topic 13 falls in the standards, and you'll see 13 a few times here on the first page. You see that 13.1 through 13.4 is identified as number sense 1.2, but if you really look at it closely in the book, and this is actually incorrect right here on this document, it has the wrong titles, but the topic and the grade are correct here. In 13.1 through 13.4, you're actually reviewing grade 5 standards. So you're going back and looking at percents. What is a percent? How to interpret percents, which is a 5th grade standard, to get ready, prepare students to do what they're doing in 13.4 through 13.7. Looking at estimating percents and finding percents of a number and dealing with tax and tip and all of those types of things. The standard you're going to really focus in on here is number sense 1.4, and you're going to find that obviously there are 5 questions on the CST. So again, like last week, we had 6 questions on the CST for number sense 1.3. We also see that for number sense 1.4 there were 5 questions. So this is a heavily tested topic, and you're going to find again the majority of that happens in 13.4 through 13.7. Let's take a look at the standard real quick. It says calculate given percentages of quantities and solve problems involving discounts at sales, interest earned, and tips. Now, the actual addressing of that standard does not happen until 13.4 and on, and what's happening in 13.1, 2, 3, and 4, like I said before, is a review. Now, you don't want to necessarily skip over those lessons. Obviously, you want to make sure that your students have a good understanding of what percent is before you get into calculating percentages. So my suggestion would be you could approach this in a few different ways. One thing would be to go ahead and give your students a pretest on those 4 lessons. So you could pull from topic test form B, you could pull some questions from the Pearson SuccessNet database on those standards, and try to find out where your students are at with 13.1, 2, 3, and 4 about what are percents, just to get an idea of how fast or slow you might be able to move through some of those lessons. So you can use those pretests to do that, to kind of diagnose where your students are at and see if you need to teach each one of those lessons in fully, if you can do some combinations of those lessons and buy yourself some time to spend more time on the actual calculations of percentages in 13.4 through 13.7. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the math background for teachers. As I said in the video last week, when I'm doing planning or when I want to look at a topic that's coming up, the first thing I want to do is take a look at that math background for teachers. And we're going to be in topic 13, math background for teachers. First thing I like to do is to take a look at the big idea, and the big idea here is ratio. When mathematical or real-world quantities have a relationship that can be stated as for every x units of the first quantity, there are y units of the second quantity. This relationship can be described as a ratio. So in topic 13, as you know, and you'll see this in the essential understanding for 13.1 and 13.3, that you're looking at percent as a special kind of ratio in which a part is compared to a whole with 100 parts, and the whole is 100%. So percent is, and the thing you want to get across to students is that percent is relative to the size of a whole. I think that's an essential understanding for students, and something they should have gotten in 5th grade, but you really want to reinforce that in your 6th grade lessons, especially as you're introducing percent at the beginning, that percent is relative to the size of the whole. So you again go through here and you can look at your different essential understandings for topic 13 and how they relate back to the big idea. Always a good idea to look there first. Understanding percents Again, you have a really nice progression here happening from topics 11 to 12 to 13, because in 11 you're talking about ratios, and in 12 you're talking about proportions, and in 13 you're moving into percent. So you can see a nice progression into working with percents. So a good thing to read here would be talking about percents, being that percent is a ratio or part is compared to a whole, which is 100. So really getting across to students that percents are really just a ratio or could be seen as a fraction, and trying to get across that idea to your students. Making that connection, I think, is huge when you are talking about percents. You're going to be introducing them to the beginning of this topic and then using them to calculate towards the end of the topic. So getting across that this is a progression from 11 to 12 to 13, and not seeing these things as discrete mathematical ideas or terms or calculations, but they all kind of relate to each other, and building that relationship for your students, I think, is going to be a big part of their understanding and them grasping what's happening in this topic. One thing you want to get across to your students, obviously, is would be to start out, because again, in 13.1 through 13.4, you're really reviewing things from 5th grade, would be to get across this idea of percents being written as a fraction and being written as a decimal. So 25% can be written as 25 hundredths decimal form or 25 hundredths in fraction form, and then also bringing it back to this model, a model that they've seen for a number of years in math, but again, you're just tying it back to that and keep going back to that idea. One thing that you might want to share with your students, I think it'd be really powerful, is just this idea down here, the teaching tip, where it talks about emphasize the meaning of percent being that it's 100, and if you tie that to century, like 100 years, or centimeter with 100 meters, I think it really gives a nice coherence to students to see that there's some consistency in the language that we're using in math as well. Okay, and then if you look to the next page for the math background for teachers, it talks about using percent and using a proportion to solve problems involving percent. But we're not going to get into that this week, because that will be for next week, because again, the first week of topic 13, you're really doing that review of 5th grade standards. So let's go ahead and take a look at lesson 13.1. And I really like this lesson, and I really especially like the interactive learning part. Let me show you this real quick. I think this is really valuable. I know that it's, again, a 5th grade standard, and you can make the argument that because it's a 5th grade standard, I'm not going to teach it because it's not one of my standards. But what this really does is it really gives your students a review from 5th grade, but B, it really gives them a model, a basis to start looking at percent and what percent means. So in this case, you're posing a problem. You're asking students, what are some different ways that you can show 1/4? And then having students discuss their ideas with a partner. Now, just this point right here, you're going to get a good sense of what your students know and don't know when it comes to representing a fraction here, this fraction being 1/4, in different ways. So again, we had talked about you wanting to know what your students know and don't know from 5th grade. This is a good opportunity that as students are talking and discussing with their partner, that you're walking around the classroom, listening to conversations, maybe writing down some notes about what students are saying, and looking for those misconceptions, those misunderstandings, so you can address those either in this piece or in your actual direct instruction lesson. Okay, so once you've got some idea of what your students know and you've listened to some of their conversations, then you're going to start linking it to prior knowledge. Again, we're trying to make that connection from what we've been doing earlier, not only in this year, but earlier in mathematics in grade 5 and grade 4 and grade 3, and talking about, for instance, in here it says in previous lessons you worked with equivalent fractions. And students have been talking about equivalent fractions for a number of years now. And the question you're asking your students is, why are 1/4 and 4/16 equivalent fractions? Now, you're hoping that they're going to say something like what's written here. You can multiply both the numerator and the denominator of 1/4 by 4 and get 4/16. That's your hope. And that's going to also give you an idea of where your students are in their understanding of equivalent fractions. Then it moves into your small steps. So you're going to give out that recording sheet 6. Now, you've already had an opportunity to have your students work together to figure out how to do or how to show 1/4 in different ways. Here on the working with the interactive recording sheet, you kind of want to guide them through this. You don't want to just give it to them and have them work individually or in groups, but actually kind of walk through this and use this as an opportunity to talk through and start introducing this idea of percents. And some of your students are going to get it right off the bat. They're going to understand what you're doing and they're going to see it happening. For other students who may not have a solid understanding of percent and how that's tied to fractions, this is a good opportunity for you to show them visually. So I would highly suggest using this interactive piece and spending some time in your lesson to work on this. It's a really good foundational piece for your students. Out of the first 4 lessons in Topic 13, I think this is one of the best, especially to give you an idea of where your students are at and their understanding of not only equivalent fractions and but also percents, and to see what they remember from 5th grade and see if they can kind of make some connections between what they've learned previously to what they're learning right now. And then it also gives you an opportunity to visually show your students what you're talking about when it comes to percent. So you're talking about these 2 different sets on the recording sheet, and you can really start tying fractions, equivalent fractions, and then showing them in percent form visually. Okay, I want to take a look at 13.4 real quick. Now, 13.4 is estimating percents. And I know that sometimes people tend to want to skip the estimation lessons in Envision. I think they're all really important. I think this one's extremely important in the sense that you're really providing students with, I think, an understanding and something that we do in everyday life as adults when we're estimating percents, whether we're at the grocery store or we are at dinner and we're calculating a tip. There's all sorts of times that we as adults do estimation. So anyway, one of the things, and I know that you all know how to do this and you've seen this before, but one of the ways in which they show to do estimation is to round a percent to a multiple of 10. Or sorry, one of the ways they show is to round a percent to the multiple of a tenth. So for example, if we have 38%, we want to find 38% of 49. We can estimate this by taking 38% and rounding that to 40%, which we know is 4/10 in decimal form. And we can take 49 and round that to 50. So we're finding some easier numbers to work with here. We're then going to take and multiply those products. So we're going to take 4/10, multiply it by 50, and we get 20. So our estimation is 20. Now, if we actually did the calculation for that and set it up as a proportion, and we said 38 over 100, so 38% is equal to n over 49, and we multiply, we get 100n is equal to 1,862. And then obviously we would divide, and we would get n is equal to 18.62. So 18.62 being very close to my estimation of 20. It just gives students an opportunity to do some estimation and really give them some confidence, and when they're solving the calculations later on in topics 5, 6, and 7, that they have something to go back on to check their answer to see if they're on the right track. So I highly suggest showing students how to do the estimation, spending time in this lesson, not breezing over it, but actually showing them how to find how to do the estimation first, because it's really going to support them as they're moving through 13.5, 13.6, and 13.7. Hey everybody, I just want to thank you again for taking a look at this video. I know it's a short one this week. Again, you have a short week next week with 4 days of instruction. Our next video will look at the rest of topic 13. Just a couple reminders. You want to always remember to do that check for understanding at the end. We talked about that in the last video. But using something at the end of your lesson to really check to see where your students are at, get a really good idea of whether or not they're grasping the concept. Again, you can always go to the reteach materials that are in Envision. There's always the MDIS kit, which I highly recommend as a place to go to look for reteach lessons and to provide some support for your students. Again, if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions or comments for the videos, something you want to see that we haven't done, please email, give me a call, something, and then we will see about doing that. So again, thank you very much and have a good week.